Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to learn more about the changes to second notices. My name is Ashley Brown. I'm your Member Relations Specialist, and today's webinar is going to be moderated by Dina Trapman. She's also your Member Relations Specialist, and she will be taking questions throughout today's webinar. But first, let's go over a few housekeeping items. The orange arrow on your screen is used to expand or collapse the webinar interface. All attendees are in listen-only mode. You can click the screen icon to view your presentation in full screen. Please be sure to submit any questions you have using the questions box shown here, and we'll be responding to those questions at the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We'll also give a reminder when we're getting close so that you can be sure to get your questions submitted. So first things first, let's dive in. We're going to start off with defining what a second notice is. And a second notice is an additional notice that's sent when one or more member companies have not responded to the original ticket by the work to begin date and time. With that being said, effective November 1st, 2022, OKI 811 will only transmit second and subsequent notices to member companies that have not provided positive response via the OKI 811 portal, or a company could receive a second notice if an excavator informs OKI 811 that they have not received an adequate response from the member company. Okay, so what's the big deal with this change? Here is the difference. Prior to November 1, 2022, all member companies that were listed on the original request would receive a second notice, even if the second notice wasn't for that company. Now, with this new change, only the companies that have not responded via the portal or those who have not provided the excavator with an adequate response will receive that second notice. So now when your company receives a second notice, it's imperative that you take immediate action. First and foremost, you want to determine if you have any underground lines at or near the excavation site. Next, be sure to mark those underground lines if you do, obviously. After that, be sure that your company is positively responding to the request via the OKI 811 portal. And in addition to the above, you may also choose to reach out to the excavator to ensure that communication has been received. And remember that both of these pieces, the marking and clearing of the excavation site and responding via the portal, they're both critical to protecting life and the underground utilities. And now that you know what to do when you receive a second notice, let's talk about how to reduce the amount of second notices that your company could receive. First thing you want to do is make sure that your mapping is up to date. When we say mapping, we're referring to service areas, also known as registered assets. You want to make sure that the mapping that OKI 811 has on file for your organization is current. If your mapping is out of date, you could be receiving tickets and second notices for assets that your company no longer owns or operates. You can use the service area editor to view, edit, and update your mapping. And for any mapping inquiries, including assistance with the service area editor, please contact the OKI 811 GIS department. Now, the next way to reduce second notices is to ensure that your company is responding to every single locate request via the OKI 811 portal. This is a requirement of the law that went into place in November 2021. Also, keep in mind that your positive response needs to provide clear and exact communication to the excavator. So out of the 7 responses you can choose from, there are 3 that require a comment. They are other, partially marked / large project, and critical facility / in conflict. You want to be sure that you're reading those positive response codes in completion. So that's partially marked. It should be partially marked because it is a large project. Or if you use no access not marked, that means it was not marked because there was no access. If you choose other, be sure that you're including information that justifies why this response doesn't fit into any other positive response category. Action 4 is partially marked large project. Comments are also required for this code, and as we mentioned, you should be only using those for locate requests that are deemed to be a large projects. For code number 7, critical facility and conflict, be sure that you're providing comments for those codes as they are required. When you're adding a comment, you should be adding information that you think would be helpful to the excavator. For example, if you marked with painter flags, or if you want to provide a phone number for the excavator to reach out to you. You can also include any information that you feel would be valuable to have on record for your own documentation. So let's take a look at a fantastic example. Here we have a positive response comment that gives a lot of fantastic details about where within the work site a locator experienced trouble locating the underground lines. So they went to the work site, but they weren't able to locate those lines. Now we see here in the yellow that the locator provides really exact details that are fantastic for documentation. They include where the locator could not find the lines and the actions that the locator took to remedy the situation. However, the positive response code that was used was the correction not marked response. So this ticket could technically result in a second notice because the excavator needs further clarification. They don't understand the response that was given. So while this positive response does provide excellent details, the positive response code other and perhaps a phone call to the excavator might reduce confusion. So how does the second notice change affect members and how you operate? So before this change, your company may have been disregarding all the second notice tickets they received because they were usually for another company, because you guys are really great about responding to locate requests. Now, when your company receives a second notice, you know that a response is needed from your company and that immediate action is required. Also important to mention is that now with the second notices, the work to begin and ticket expiration dates will stay the same. So they're not going to change just because a second notice is issued. And the excavator will still be required to update their ticket when their work is not completed by the end of the 14th calendar day after the stated work to begin date on the original request. So let's wrap all of this up. Be sure to submit your questions if you have them before we go any further, because we are going to start the Q&A session here in just a moment. First and foremost, you want to remember that effective now, if your company receives a second notice, immediate action is required. A company could receive a second notice because they did not provide positive response via the portal, or because the excavator did not receive adequate response from the member, or the response that they received were confusing. Your markings, your communications, and your positive responses should provide clear and concise information to the locator. And please remember that positive response is required for every ticket by law. And when your company receives a second notice, be sure to mark or clear the excavation site and provide positive response via the portal. And last but not least, remember that the ticket expiration date and the work to start date will not change on second or subsequent notices. Now let's see if we have any questions. Dina, did we have any questions today?
We only got one really good question, and they were wanting to know, once they receive that second notice, do they need to post their positive response to the second notice, or should they post that positive response to the original locate request?
That is a fantastic question. You can go ahead and post your positive response to the second notice in the OKI 811 portal. Great question. If you guys think of any other questions, be sure to send them to us. We'd be more than happy to help. If you think of any questions about webinar topics, or you have suggestions for future webinar topics, reach out to our Education and Outreach Department at education@oki811.org. To register for future webinars or watch a recorded webinar, go to okie811.org/education events. If you have any questions regarding your membership, including positive response or how to sign up for positive response, be sure to reach out to member services at memberservices@okie811.org. And once again, if you have any questions about your mapping, including the service area editor, our GIS team is more than happy to help. You can contact them at gis@okie811.org. There will be a survey at the end, and we very much appreciate your feedback. Thanks so much again for joining us. Stay safe and have a great day.